Broadcasting live from the Business Radio X studios in Atlanta, Georgia, it's time for Atlanta Business Radio, spotlighting the city's best businesses and the people who lead them.
Welcome to Atlanta Business Radio. I'm your host, Corey Rick. Today I have the distinct pleasure of interviewing an old friend who's experienced fantastic business success over the last 30-plus years. Our guest comes to us with vast business experience across varying industries and companies. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Barry Madel to our show. I've known Barry for probably 45 years, just a great guy. He comes to us with tremendous experience. Barry, welcome.
Well, thank you, Corey.
Barry, tell the listenership a little bit about yourself. You have such tremendous business acumen. Tell us a little more about you so we can get to know you.
Well, I'll leave out the parts about growing up with you, and we can keep that as on the side.
We've known each other 45 years, two of the best years of your life. Is that where you're going with this?
I'm not even 45, Corey, so we won't even say that.
Okay,
right?
All right.
But no, so a little bit about me. Grew up Midwestern values, similar to you, up in cornfield in Minnesota.
God's country.
God's country, yep. And but we didn't like to shovel it, but it's still God's country. And, I went to school there, moved I got my MBA and went to Ohio, actually, and started working in a manufacturing company. It was actually a division of Bemis company, which was headquartered in Minneapolis. And really kind of progressed there on the business side of things. I'm married. We have four kids from my first marriage, and then I inherited 4 kids from my second marriage. So collectively 8 kids. My kids, my most recent one that graduated from Northwestern Law School just recently.
Oh, congratulations.
Well,
what a tremendous achievement.
Yeah. She's employment and labor attorney. So
outstanding.
She's very excited, and we're really happy for her. But then, the other, my son is in a startup software company. Actually, it's phase 2 startup, so they're refunded again, and they're going through a lot of growth there. Have a daughter down in South Carolina who's a speech-language pathologist. And then my youngest daughter is still up in Ohio where she grew up, and she's has her own graphic design business, so she's doing really well. And then our other kids with Joyce's and mine are, I think some of them. One of them runs about 85 people working her at Vistage, and another one's in supply chain, Georgia Tech grad. So just a whole bunch of kids, whole bunch of places, and really, we're really proud of the kids.
And all of them have done extremely well, which to me, knowing you is not a surprise. You come from a family of folks that have excellent business acumen and great results. Tell us about how growing up in a family with your dad as a business leader, how that impacted what you're doing now.
Yeah, it's looking back on my childhood, the dinner every night between 6 and 6:30, depending on things. And
that doesn't sound familiar.
Similar to you, yeah. And it wasn't necessarily let's everybody go and talk about corporate happy flowery talk. It was basically a debate that went on at dinner over news, over events, over people, over things. And really, the opportunity, I think, I had one of 4 kids. I was the third out of 4 kids. The opportunity to, we were treated as adults, and so we were more participative in what was going on, in around the world. And I think that really brought a lot to my personality going forward. So my dad had a successful healthcare business. Yeah. And learning about that, and then also watching how astute that he was, because it was in nursing home business. Yeah. He was smart enough to actually be working on the lobbying side of things, because a lot of the reimbursements for healthcare, long-term healthcare rates, are state mandated. And so he was very astute to be able to be involved in that, to be talking to people on that, and it really protected and then allowed him to grow his business. Yeah. And then that, obviously, kind of put a fire in the belly, if you will, for us kids.
Yeah, he built a tremendous business. I know from just watching him and interacting with him. He built a great business that really helped people. He did it the right way. And certainly a lot of that has obviously rubbed off on you. He must be very proud of all that you've done.
Yeah, it's as you and I have spoken before, I think, one of the greatest things that my parents are, and I in turn try being as a parent and also, really as a manager, is how to advocate for either your people or your children. And my mom and my dad, my gosh, they cared so much about us and want so much good for us.
Yeah, and I think that's probably why you all have done so good. I mean, knowing your other brothers and how well they've done. Frankly, none of this is a surprise to me, having known the family and having known you guys. And so it isn't a surprise to me to see your kids doing so well. So that's a testament to you and your family and your upbringing to me.
I think that's that really demonstrates the really positive attribute of high expectations.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I have a saying at work, I have this saying, which is, my kids' grades are as good as I expect them to be. And so I find at work, it's all about expectations, right? And so I expect you to do this. I expect you to do that. Not to be a jerk. It's just a lot of the times you just need to make sure that people understand, hey, it may be easy street for you there, but this work still has to get done. And to really instill those expectations among your team or among your children, it's the same thing.
Well, I think having that, don't you think it brings out the best? Don't you think it brought out the best in your two brothers who are also incredibly successful?
I absolutely think so. Yeah. I think that people want to be challenged.
Yeah.
And that as long as you recognize and love them when they fail, people want to perform well and they want to please, I believe.
How much of your success do you think you owe to the discipline that comes along with being a very good golfer and growing up in a family of very good golfers?
So that would definitely be something that's an interesting insight. So especially with my game compared to yours, it kills me to say you're a better player than me, but I think that.
Can you speak in a little louder to the microphone? Stone, can we make sure we got that recorded?
I'll make sure.
Yeah. But I think, my swing, different than yours, right? I had to beat balls all the time, every day. And I was not going to be able to go and say, okay, I'm going to just practice twice this week and expect to go out and, shoot a 70 or something like that.
No, that was your brother, Pete.
That was Pete, yeah.
Except he didn't practice twice. He just
never
one
did.
time a year and then complain, I only shot 70. I suck.
That's right, yeah. But I think your swing, too, though, you just have a more solid fundamentally. You have less a more compartmentalized swing than I do. And so I had to go and do a lot of work. I had to go and continue to hone it just because I knew that if I didn't do that, then I wasn't going to play as well. And the goal for me then was I wanted to do well.
Yeah. Well, and I think, having a family of very good golfers helped, develop some level of competition, right? Because you're wanting to play well like your mom and dad and well like your brothers. And I'm sure that brought out the best in you. And to me, it seems like there is crossover in having that expectation that you outlined earlier and knowing that you had to practice a couple of times a week to get those results. I mean, there is crossover in doing your business, and it doesn't surprise me that you took what you learned on the golf course with your family and applied it in business and into your family, and which is, to me, why you've done so well.
Yeah, I mean, the saying I use is just work. If you do work, then typically, if you try hard and focus your efforts and have logic and forethought into it, generally speaking, you're going to do well.
How did you decide to take your first job with Bemis, right? You went to work with Bemis in the mid-'80s. What led you to that?
What led me to that actually was it was true serendipity. I was actually at a job interview with Pillsbury Consumer Products, and they were going to offer me the job, and went to the restroom in the Minnesota Club in downtown Minneapolis. And while in the bathroom, I looked over and I saw the executive vice president of Bemis Company, who was the parent of a friend of mine. And I said, hi, Mac, how are you doing? And, he said, great. And I said, what are you doing here? And he looked at me in the eye and he said, this is my club. What are you doing here? 21-year-old kid going there. And I said, oh, yeah, you're right. So I told him that I was, going to probably go work for Pillsbury. He asked me how did I like, the company. And I said, a little bit buttoned up. Not sure if I really, like them as much as I could. And I got home that afternoon and was told by my wife that Ed McBride had called and wanted me at the airport tomorrow to fly to Ohio and talk to the CEO of a company about doing a new business position there.
Well, it seems like you've really made the most of that opportunity because that turned into other roles, right? You did well enough early on where it turned into other roles. Tell us about that.
Yeah, that was, I really enjoyed my time at Bemis. I had a perfect job. My first job was, I reported to the CEO of a $300 million company.
How was that?
Rephrase.
How was that experience?
So it was great because what my role was when he wanted to get into new markets or do acquisitions, I was the first person to look at it, and he would tease me and say, and if you can't talk me out of it, then I'm going to bring in somebody that makes more money than you to look at it harder. So I got just this incredible exposure to all of our company that I was working at, but also all of Bemis company, which is all their divisions. So the exposure that I got to the businesses and then also to the senior leadership within Bemis was just exceptional because I really learned a lot from a lot of people. And in the process, got to meet a lot of friends that ultimately were, willing to give me advice throughout my time at Bemis.
It seems extraordinary that you would work with such a high-level person right away. What did you learn from that?
What I learned the most from that was a global perspective early in my career. So Bob Molnarek was the gentleman that I worked for, and Bob had global responsibility for, like I said, about a $300 million business. And I remember, Bob would just have different takes on a domestic market when he would say, well, yeah, but, our European business, it does this, so I wouldn't get too excited about that because I believe that the fundamentals in Europe are going to be greater than the fundamentals here in the States. So it really allowed me early in my career to shape my view that, we aren't just living in a cocoon here in the United States.
What made you decide to get a master's in business?
When I was when I graduated undergraduate, I went and did a few interviews. And the feedback that I got from a bunch of the companies that I was interviewing with was, because I asked them for their advice, and they said, what I would do is I would get my MBA, and then I would come back here because we pay more, and it's a better career path for people with an MBA. So I think I had the presence of mind to at least go and solicit input from the hiring companies on campus, and then a couple were also not through campus interviews, but they taught me that.
I think that's an excellent trait that you have. You don't have a problem asking for input, and and knowing you, all kidding aside, you don't really take things personally. So I think that lends itself to becoming better and being able to play up to the expectations. Did you enjoy going to school, getting your MBA?
No, your dad was a dentist, so I can't ask if you enjoyed your last root canal. But it was a 2-year program that I went through, mm-hmm. and I finished my 2-year program in 15 months. So I had to get approval from the dean to be able to have the course load that I had.
Oh, that's impressive.
It was so, my whole approach was that I wanted it, as long as it was going to be painful, I wanted to make it short. So What's the difference between a little more pain while you're going through it?
Well, that to me is outstanding. So you engaged in a 24-month program and finished in 15 months.
Yep.
So the answer is you didn't really have a lot of fun.
That's the answer, Corey. You're right.
You have all of this business experience, looking at and knowing you. You're kind of a generalist. You've had a great deal of P&L responsibility with papers and labels, signage, plastics, papers, flexible packaging, paper packaging. What do you really like best about all the things that you've done?
The thing that really engages me in business is the opportunity to solve a puzzle. So, within Bemis, I was kind of, slated for a senior officer position. So I spent my fair amount of time with industrial psychologists, and matter of fact, the main one that I worked with is still a very good friend of mine. And I've already reached out to Stuart, before, 6 months before I finished my last role. I reached out to him and said, okay, get my thinking right. How do I want to be thinking about things? And Stuart, reiterated what he's been, working with me in my whole life, is that, Barry, you have a high need and love for and love complexity. You have a high need for and love ambiguity. So you really need to find a role that gives you that opportunity to go in, figure something out that's very complex, that's very ambiguous. And my high really is, after been in a business for usually 60 to 90 days, I can usually sit down and have the business put on one piece of paper saying, here's what it is, here's what it looks like, here's what the opportunities are, and here's where the tension points are that we have to work on.
That must be a great feeling to go into companies that are not doing well, they're not hitting their potential, and turning them around. That seems to me, when I think of you, I think of, turnaround artist, fireman, if you will, coming in to, put out the fire and make sure that the business gets turned around. That also must create a similar amount of excitement.
It's fun because you can see the results on the P&L. But what's equally fun is that the employees, it's not like they enjoy not doing well.
Yeah.
And so, one of the big things that I'm always careful of, any leadership role I take, whether it's turnaround or not, I am not the savior. I'm a Bain inspirational leadership guy. So I go in and I say, you know what? I'm a good listener. I've got some experience. I have some models that I apply to my approach, and I will work with you and through you, and together we can get out of this. I'm good at figuring some of the things out that perhaps others maybe aren't as skilled or as knowledgeable on. But at the end of the day, it's, the only way you get anything done is leading a team to help get that work done and pointed the boat in the right direction.
One of the things that I've always been impressed with you about is you're happy to be a leader. You've done that effectively. You've done well in a lot of different areas. You're humble, but you're also a great teammate. I know that from playing in various golf tournaments with you over the years that, the last thing you would say to me if I hit a bad shot was, hey, you hit a bad shot. I mean, you were an excellent teammate, and you were all about, the positive parts, and clearly that's carried over into your businesses and in your relationships with your family. That I think is, most people I've seen are, they're a great leader, but they're not really a great teammate. It's rare when you have somebody that kind of can be both, right? And it kind of goes to that servant leadership thing, hey, I can be out front on some things, I can take some heat on some things, but I'm also happy to give credit where it's due, and also just happy to kind of blend in to get stuff done. And I think that's a real gift, to be able to play both roles. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think that, when we were talking expectations earlier, so, I carry with me when I go to a company, I have an email that I send out, which is my expectations of performance. And one of the things in my expectations is that managers have to get comfortable with the fact that there are going to be many situations where they don't know as much as the people that work for them.
And that's okay.
And what I tell them is that that's actually their role, is that it needs to be okay, because a manager's job isn't to be smarter than the employee in what they're doing. A manager's job is to remove the barriers that are in the way of the employee. Now, some of those barriers exist, but other ones don't exist, and the employee just made it up and said, well, here's my problem. And then the manager's job is to sit down with them and say, sorry, that's really not in your way.
Yeah, you mentioned the removing barriers. That's such a crucial part of running anything, or having a good team, and just making it easy for the players to play. And a lot of people don't get that.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Is that all we're trying to do is just foster the right environment and allow people to do well. And again, part of that model, right, is that the job is to set the course, establish the direction, lead the team, but also to be a coworker many times as well, and to be a co-owner of a strategy rather than the architect of the strategy.
That's a temperature thing, and I think that's a gift. Being able to understand, okay, I got to be out front on this, or I got to blend in.
That's right.
And a lot of people either can't or aren't willing to do that, and I think that's another gift that you have. I think. You have all this business experience? How have things evolved business-wise? If you had to pick 2 or 3 things, the evolution of the business based on your experience, what would you say those things are?
So I want to make sure that I'm understanding what you're asking. Are you talking about how the business evolved, or how has my style evolved?
How has your style, well, both, really. How has your style evolved, and how has, the businesses that you've led and managed and, achieved in, how have they evolved?
Yeah, so the first thing I can talk about the businesses. So typically, what I've found in the businesses that I've led is I can work pretty well with a team where collectively, what I always call is institutional or organizational knowledge, where collectively we can dramatically scale and improve our knowledge as an organization, because there's so much potential for knowledge in organizations that exists, and usually, leaders don't pull all that out. I've been blessed where I've been, fortunate enough to work with some folks that will, work with me to get that. So I'm always proud when I work with a company that we know where the puck is going, and we get to where the puck is going before it's there,
as opposed to going where it's at, which is what everybody else does.
Exactly, yeah. And so that's what I'm always most proud of. That's a very pride-filled moment when I go, look, guys, we did this, guys and gals. We were able to say that it's going here. We got there first. Now look we're taking advantage of that. I think that's one of the most satisfying things that I can be a part of, and that's one of the things I think that the organizations I've worked at, that that we've been able to have that happen. And I think the second part to your question is how has my style evolved? My style has definitely over time as I age, humility becomes a greater part of who I am.
Do you think that's important?
I think that's vitally important, because I think that people want to own their own ideas, and they want to be a part of their own success. Yeah. And a lot of leaders tend to want to, say it's all about me. It's all about me. Well, it's not all about me. It's really all about the team and how we're doing. And the more that I can, success for me nowadays is if somebody walks around thinking that they had an idea that maybe I had, that's a win for me, because they're going to try really hard for their own idea. They'll probably try equally hard for mine, but I want them to have that satisfaction that, yeah, I did this, and that this is all about what I did.
With your business experience, what do you think are the top 2 or 3 lessons you've learned over the years?
So I would think that the number one lesson that I've learned is when I was talking earlier about the potential for knowledge that exists, the latent, if you will, knowledge that exists in an organization. And, if you solicit that, and, one of the things we've not talked about is just the fact that you learn a lot more by listening than you do by talking. And so if you go and work with people and say, I don't know that, can you educate me? And ask the right questions, work from a planned approach, and ask the right questions and listen, and then test for validity, to ensure that you're hearing it right. A lot of the knowledge within an organization is there, and people know what to do. It's just that it's really not tied into any cohesive strategy or vision or direction. So I think that that's one of the key things that I've learned. And I think the other thing that I've learned is that you can get rapid advancement, but you don't have to always act like you're in a hurry. And so I think that, you can work with people, you can establish some metrics, you can get them to buy into those metrics, and you can really achieve a whole lot in a short period of time. as long as you're...
Well, clearly with the turnarounds and the experience that you've had of helping these other companies sort of get moving in the right direction.
Right. But, you don't have to run around like your hair's on fire all the time and have people put people into what I call a high-speed wobble.
Yeah.
Then they freeze up and they don't get anything done. So, you have to really demonstrate, hey, you know what? I can be self-centered. I'm not going to, go in all and do all these things. I just want to be able to get this part done.
One of the takeaways that I have in seeing your success over the years is that you have a very strong ability to inspire confidence. And what I'm wondering is, you go into a circumstance like when you're a fireman and you've got to kind of learn what's going on. You've got to get trust almost immediately because you've got to get people to talk to you. Mm-hmm. How do you get them to buy into your plan?
So the way that I do is I just communicate ridiculous amounts of information and frequency. And when I say ridiculous amounts, I probably ought to expand on that a little bit. So what I do is, when I go into an organization, I ask the exact same questions every single time that I'm new. And I publish those questions to the entire organization up front. And then I only stay on that script, because that way the organization and the people in the organization know that they know exactly what I'm asking, and that I don't have any side conversations with other people, because that's a huge eroder of trust, is to talk to you about one thing and somebody else about another thing. Because when you two compare notes, you're going to go, well, what was the agenda here? He asked you this, he asked her that. So really the consistency of the questions first. And then after that, then just follow up every week. I send a weekly email saying, here's what I learned this week. And it's not, a 92-page email. It's, 2 to 3 page email of here's all the questions that you know that I asked, and here's what the answers were that I learned this week to those questions. So that by the time you're done, it takes 2 months if the organization has any size at all. By the time you're done, the organization is right there with you, and then they're getting that self-awakening and that self-realization. Oh, yeah, we do need to change this. You're right, we aren't measuring waste. You're right, we don't set goals. You're right, we don't do this, we don't do that. So they're already there. So by the time I show up, 60, 90 days later saying, hey, let's do this, let's do that, they're kind of looking at me saying, well, duh.
Well, yeah, you've already you already have a process and a system in place for gathering information. And, I think that you've seen the gains from doing the same things with all the different people and getting the different players to buy in. That's obviously been very, very effective. When you're not working and having all this success, what is it that you do with your free time? If you have free time.
If I have free time, yeah. So, what the latest thing that I've been doing, which I think, stresses my wife out because she doesn't see the end game yet. I've embarked upon a hydroponics little project that I have. So we are growing basil and rosemary and thyme and oregano.
No parsley and sage?
No parsley and sage, because we don't like, although we do like parsley, but parsley isn't that necessary.
You just don't like Simon and Garfunkel.
No, I'm not even gonna dignify that comment. But so that is, in the amount of chemistry and detail that's required in hydroponics. I mean, I have a tent. It's temperature controlled. I have to manage pH. I have to manage the salt level, which is fertilizer level. There's just 100 things that you have to dial in and keep going. But it's 40% more efficient than planting something in the dirt.
What prompted you to do that?
Last year in August, our basil died because it had root rot. And we realized that, oh my God, or actually it was I realized that, oh my gosh, we aren't going to have any basil for the rest of the year because, we can't replant basil in the fall. And I'd never really sat and thought about the fact, well, what are we going to do for basil? Because Joyce and I love to have basil on chicken and things like that. And so I realized I had a problem, and I embarked upon finding a solution.
You've also joined the Big Green Egg cult.
I have.
And what do you like best about that?
So the egg is fun because I love how versatile it is. You can get a 550-degree temperature grill, or you can slow cook at 180 degrees. And I think that's so cool to be able to do that. and then just the different ways of cooking. You can do direct, indirect, and things like that. It's a fascinating way to cook, to use a grill as an oven or a grill as a grill.
It is fascinating to me, and I think like anything, people can take things to the nth degree. I mean, my wife got me a Big Green Egg, I don't know, 8 years ago, thereabouts, and I talk to people, they make their own rubs. They really go all out, and I don't take it that far because, I mean, you can buy a rub, but I think there's a lot of people that really love the details and getting into the weeds about how brine rubs and so on. But I would agree with you. There's nothing that tastes. You can't match the taste of the food coming off the egg, whether it's fish or vegetables or corn or hamburgers. And I think once you figure out the heat, once you figure out how to manage the temperature, then then things really change. At least that they did for me.
I agree.
Tremendous item there. And I think the other thing with the egg is you know what you're putting on it, right? You go out to eat, and there's a reason why all that stuff tastes so good at restaurants, right? Because they're putting oil and butter and this and that and the other. And I think you got to really watch that. But the Big Green Egg is really a neat thing. It's a great gathering point for families. It's a great gathering point to entertain. And I just thought I would throw that in there because I think it's a tremendous cooking instrument.
Now, have you heard of sous vide cooking?
No.
So sous vide with Big Green Egg is the way to go. Sous vide is a water bath. So, for instance, if you're going to cook a steak, how do you eat your steak?
How do I eat it?
What temperature?
550.
No. What?
Medium.
Medium? Okay,
Yeah.
So medium is typically 135, 140 degrees. So what you would do is you would vacuum seal your actual steak and then put it into a very, very sensitive water bath where it's controlled to the single degree Fahrenheit. So you would dial your steak into probably 130 is what you would want to start at. Then the entire steak will be cooked to 130 degrees because it's in a submerged water bath. So all you'll do then is take it out of the bag and then throw it on the grill at 550, mark it on both sides, and you have a perfectly cooked steak all the way through. So when you go to a steakhouse, notice it, because almost all steakhouses cook sous vide. You'll be able to look on a cross section of the steak, and it will be the exact same color all the way throughout, as opposed to when you don't cook sous vide, it's more, it's darker, it's less red on the outside of the steak and then pinker on the inside.
I feel like Johnny Carson. I did not know that.
This will be my gift to Corey that he will remember me by now.
One of the many things. Do you get a charge out of sharing your wins with your two brothers and your dad, knowing all the success that you guys have had collectively?
It's funny. We typically don't talk about business to each other. It's more personal conversations. Yeah. It's probably sounds cocky, but I think we just assume that we're doing well because because you are. Yeah, because we are. So, like when I talk to Chris or Pete, it's more about, how's mom, how's dad, what's going on here, something like that.
Kids, nephews, nieces. If you were to wave a magic wand and you're looking for an opportunity, what would that opportunity look like for you?
So right now I've got, I have, as I tell people, a unicorn that I'm looking for. And the unicorn is some person, man, woman, probably 50 to 80 years old, running their company, don't have a clear exit strategy. And they are probably a lifestyle business, so not super profitable, maybe 5-8%, type EBITDA profitability. And something has happened in their life where now they have a problem. And so that's my unicorn, is because I can help them quickly be able to improve their business and allow them to get to what, would be a liquidity event and be able to sell that within, 9-18 months. That's the unicorn that I'm looking for. They're out there. It's just you have to be patient to find them, and you have to be pretty well connected as well in order to get the phone call when the unicorn does show up. Absent that, my the current direction I have, if I don't find that, is just another P&L leadership position, probably a minimum $40 million. When we were talking earlier about the complexity and the ambiguity, that seems to be one of the starting points for me that gets interesting enough where it's it gets my intellectual attention.
Is there any specific industry or business that we should be targeting the listenership with?
So my manufacturing experience and
tons of manufacturing experience,
a whole bunch of manufacturing experience, and then also the fintech space. So the amount of pretty rapid growth that we experience in fintech, and the way that we were able to really go in work on retention in that space. I learned through some other folks in that space that the efforts that we made were not only impressive, but they were also very unique in creative solutions to problems in that segment.
What do you think? What do you think are the biggest learnings that you've had recently with innovation of technology in business? I mean, if you had to pick one or two things, technology has certainly revolutionized a lot of these businesses. If you had to choose one or two technologies or one or two movements, what would you say they are?
Marketing communications. I would definitely think that. Within that, I would say it's all about more of the marketing automation. So the fact that you can, I don't have to go and manage my communication with my customer any longer and personally go and hit the send button on something like that. I can have a well-constructed strategy and say, okay, I want to be able to communicate with this group of customers in this way and set that all up through marketing automation and not have to go and be a part of all those moving parts that were a part of marketing.
How does all that fit together? Right, because doesn't the marketing automation, doesn't that somehow interact with your CRM and your website and SEO? How does all that fit together?
Well, I mean, that's why Salesforce is doing so well, right? So obviously the CRM, the customer relationship management module has to be the main vehicle that you design around, and then you add on other products around that. But I mean, especially with Salesforce now, the sky's almost unlimited in terms of what type of bolt-ons and add-ons you have. There's so many different types of adjunct programs that work with Salesforce today.
There's no question about that. They're an unbelievable company. I mean, I've been a big believer in Salesforce for 10 years, and they seem to come out with something every single day. But you certainly embraced that in the businesses that you've been in, and it certainly has helped create more business. And it's a little bit different than 30 years ago when we might send out a direct mail piece or put an ad in a paper of some sort. That's certainly, I would agree with you, that's the digital marketing and the marketing automation has certainly been a game changer here.
Yeah, it just it completely changed the rules as a marketer of what you can see, and you can test what you're doing daily. If if you're so inclined, depends somewhat on your sales cycle, but you can actually gauge what your open rates, your read rates, your click through rates are. And in B2B world and B2C world. So, I mean, it's applicable in both areas.
Do you enjoy that component, the marketing and the automation and the communication? Do you enjoy that part of the business?
I appreciate that part of the business. I don't know if I would, if you were telling me that's what I was going to do the rest of my life.
You'd probably say, let me think about that. No?
Yeah, let me get back to you on that one. Yeah.
That's certainly an important component of that, and I've had the benefit of I've been the benefactor of your experience there and your coaching around that. That has been certainly valuable for me. I think the thing with marketing automation is that's applicable in most businesses, maybe any business, because customers have a certain set of buying behaviors that they have. and there's a certain order to things, and there's a certain timeline, and I think that helps really sort of spell it all out. It was a tremendous learning experience for me when you introduced that to me. So that is something that I feel very grateful about in terms of one of the things you've introduced to me. When you think about coaching, and particularly Vistage, tell me how that experience has impacted, how you do things in your outlook.
So, Vistage, the CEO peer-to-peer group, I've been, I think, just the recipient of one of the best CEO coaches that exists out there, named Austin Jackson.
Yeah, I would concur.
And I think in order to have a good coach, you need to be coachable.
Yeah.
Well,
you have to be open to it. Would you agree?
Yeah, you have to be open, and you have to recognize your own infallibilities, and be willing to to honestly answer a probing question that somebody asks you. Because it's easy when you get a probing question, if you see where it's headed, you can still deliver misinformation and expose that vulnerability of being incorrect and having to admit it. So I think that the value that Austin has provided me is that I'm more interested in what I'm doing wrong than what I'm doing right, because it gives an opportunity for greater advancement quickly. And I think that to gain from experience of someone else who's been in just a multitude of industries, who's been very successful at doing it, and also just so insightful.
Yeah.
That they can provide some input and really, that Johari's window. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the what do I have in my life that's unknown to me and also unknown to others, and to help me get to that and identify that so that I can get better personally.
Well, I think the fact that you were open to coaching, even with all the success you've had, says something about you. I think that's a great trait. Also, I think the fact that in one of our lunches 8 or 9 years ago, you introduced the concept to me, and I've been a Vistage member now for 8 or 9 years, and that was really an unselfish thing for you to have done, and I've benefited tremendously by being in that also, and I'm in Austin's group, and so that kind of experience, having bought and sold companies, having managed turnarounds, all those things he's done, and for me, I can go into a meeting and think, this is insane what I'm about to bring up. Nobody's been through. And he'll say, here's what you do. You do this, 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 and this. And it's 100% right every time.
Yeah.
And I think that, had I met him in 2000 or 2001, there's no telling where I would be, because everything that I'm doing now took a quantum leap once I, became open to that after your introduction. So I think one of the other things that I would describe you as is unselfish, but that's been a really, really great experience for me. And certainly I think you have to be in a place where you're open to hearing other opinions, because we have a saying in Vistage, it's carefrontation.
Yep.
I don't always like what's being said, but I'm going to get the opinions from the 10 or 12 people. It's unvarnished, and it's always going to be without an agenda. And I think that it's a tremendously valuable thing that you introduced me to. So for that, I'm grateful. Going forward, do you have a certain industry or a certain thing that you'd like to do? To me, with all the things that you've done, how do you narrow down what you want to do?
No, that's kind of been the difficult part for me right now.
I mean, to me, because couldn't you come on and be a consultant and help companies get to where they need to go, right? I mean, because one of the things that I've heard you say, and I maybe have made this up, but you like a definite beginning, middle, and end. And so to me, that might be something where, you have this fireman mentality. I know I keep bringing this up, but I mean, companies are having a difficult time. You get in your 60 to 90 days, you learn what they need to do, you put the right players in the right seats, and you move on. Isn't that something that you could do?
Yeah, it's something that I could do, but I don't think I would want to do it.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I was careful to request from who I talked about earlier, my industrial psychologist, Stuart, and then also Austin's advice is it would be relatively easy. I've already had probably 4 different opportunities to go in and be a consultant and work with people or companies to help them. But there's nothing like being a part of the team and on the team. And that's what I would be giving up. And I would just, instead, be a, advisor to the team. And there's just not as much personal satisfaction for me in that.
So certainly, you certainly could, be the consultant, the fireman, but that isn't what you want. You want to be on a team. You want a chance to build the team, to improve it, and to get it to the next level. That's kind of what I'm hearing.
Yeah, that's what energizes me is to lead that team to greatness. And when we haven't had the chance to talk about it. I mean, from an innovation perspective, I love that's really where I love being on the front end of the business with the with the people that touch the customers. Saying, okay, what are we doing today? What are our competitors doing today? Are they successful doing that? And to really map that out and saying, okay, well, why aren't we looking at the business like this? The saying I always have is don't ever let your customer get in the way of your customer. And if you look at your customer's customer and say, okay, my business really is that many times, you redefine what your business is, and you redefine a lot of times what your products and your services are. At the payments processing business where I was, we ended up doubling our relevant, market size just by redefining who our customer was. We thought we were selling to retailers. We weren't selling retailers. We were selling to specific consumers of specific retailers. Once we knew that, they had an entirely different need for some products that our retailers weren't providing. So
how did you redefine how did you do that?
It was actually the opposite of the problem. So I remember where I was and coming back from a vacation, driving in the car with everybody in the car asleep. And I was mulling over a problem that we had with our company because our retailer base was what I will call is less than desirable. And I was going, well, how do you fix that? You'd have to go and get all different types of retailers. And then the more I started thinking about it, I forced myself to think, okay, come up with good things about what your retailer base is, your customer base. And then I realized that our retailer base was just a distribution point for a bunch of products and services. And we were only selling one product to them. Go back to that company today, and we've got 4 different products to them. One product in particular will be probably at the end of this year. It could be at 20% of what our number one product line is, and in 3 years it'll easily meet or exceed what that product line is.
When you took over that company, how much did you increase their sales?
So about 200, 300%.
That's not too bad.
Didn't suck.
Wow, that's a tremendous impact. So how do you package everything that you're doing? I look at you, having known you for a long time, and I see, great leader. I see somebody that's willing to be on a team. I see somebody that's had all of this experience. And how do you package it into an opportunity, into the opportunity that you want? I mean, you have so many attributes. How do you boil it down to 2 or 3 and so on?
Yeah, that's, not well is my answer so far, because that's been some of the difficulty that I've had trying to, there's 2 dimensions that I'm really focused on. First is, what is the business? Intellectually, does the business interest me? So that's one hurdle, if you will, that you have to go through. So, if it's a static industry with just a huge commodity margin, commodity profile and a poor margin profile, then it's probably not going to be something that would be really, really interesting unless they were leaking oil really bad where they needed help to fix it. And then secondly, from a leadership position, what does that look like on the either the board side or on the owner side. So, I typically will go work and report to a board of directors or would report to a owner or couple of owners of a company. And, from a values perspective, that there needs to be a match and there needs to be compatibility there. So that's some of the difficulty that, to directly respond to your question, the difficulty is getting both of those to align. There's plenty of opportunities out there where I just think, I don't think our values would be the same, so I ought not to pursue this opportunity. So you have to be, patient and trusting enough to walk past opportunities that are out there because it's not who you are and what your value set is.
Well, you must have had a lot of decisions to make. You must have a lot of choices, and certainly you're in a great position to be able to say, yeah, I have these opportunities, but here's exactly what I want. We have to create a buying environment, a matching of interests, if you will, based on values and so on. And I think that that's a tremendously powerful place to be able to use your experience, who you are, to be able to say, to be able to look at something and go, I don't need it. Here's what I want. And I think that's a really good place to be.
Yeah, I'm constantly reminded of how blessed I am.
Yeah. Well, you've had a lot to do with it. You've had a lot of, made a lot of the right moves. You've had a lot of success, and you've swung the bat when the ball's been thrown your way.
Yeah, that's as I talk to people, that's usually one of the first conversations that people will ask. Well, are you in a hurry here? What's that look like? And that's what I always say. I want a job. I don't need a job. I want something that's meaningful, and I'm willing to wait for something that's meaningful.
You've been asked to appear on Business Radio X because because of your success, your acumen, and I think I know what sets you apart. But what do you think sets Barry Madel apart from anybody that thinks they're competing?
I think that what really, at the end of the day, sets me apart is that I do a very good job of aligning myself with either a board or owners after I have vetted to ensure compatibility from a values perspective. And I said values a number of times. So, integrity matters to me, how people treat other people, how people want to approach business, that matters to me. You can make money and still cut costs and do the right things, but you can do it in the right way and you can do it in the wrong way. So it's very important to me that I find people that want to do it the right way. So after I have that compatibility, you really aren't going to find anybody better in terms of, there's never going to be a surprise. There's always going to be a roadmap. There's typically going to be rapid improvement. There's always going to be improvement. Sometimes you can start seeing improvement in 90 days, but what distinguishes me is you will see the results, and I will treat people right, and I will also treat people with respect along with the owners, or the board.
Yeah, I think, if I were to answer that question for you, what I see, having known you all these years, is that one, first and foremost, right at the top would be inspiring confidence. And I think, and the reason that happens is because of how you go about your process of getting to know people. Hey, what's going on? You're 60 to 90 days when you ask the same questions to everybody, and there's no sort of sidebar conversations. That to me is telling. Also, you know how to lead and get things done. That's important. But you're happy to be a team player, and you're happy to see other people be successful. And usually you see one or the other. You see somebody that has to be out front on everything. They're not content to be on a team. And it's really rare when you see people that are able to do both. And I think if I were to answer that question on your behalf, those are how I would start things. Well, clearly, you understand how to turn companies around. You understand P&L, and it doesn't even really matter what the businesses are. You get people, and you know that there's a bigger picture other than Barry Madel. So those are some ways that I would use to describe you. But certainly there's a number of things that set you apart from others that think they're competing against you.
I appreciate the comments.
If you had to give the younger version of Barry advice, what would that be?
The younger version of Barry would be told that as much humility as you think that you're demonstrating, you can double it and internalize it at the same time. Is that the ability to get things done is just incredible if we don't worry about who gets credit for it. And
100%.
So I would, I take a certain degree of pride that I think I've done that relatively well in my career, but nowhere near what I would expect myself to now if I were giving advice to younger Barry.
Yeah, I would say you've done that very well. If there's a young man out there, a young lady that wanted to follow in your footsteps and follow a similar career arc, what would you tell them? What advice would you have for them?
I would tell them to surround themselves with smart people that were willing to invest in them. And that, the opportunity for somebody like a Corey, for instance, to mentor or advocate for someone looking to go into your line of business, you would own their problems with them if they would just be willing to ask for help and to invest equally with you.
Barry, you've been a tremendous success, been a tremendous guest here, and we just wish you all the best. If the listenership out there needed your services and wanted to get a hold of you, how would they do it?
Probably email would be best, which is BJ, Barry John, Madel, M like Mary, A, D like David, E like Edward, L @gmail.com.
We've got a tremendous, tremendous business resource here, Barry Madel. You've been a great guest. Continued success. Thank you for being on the show today.
Thanks so much, Corey.